So you should be looking at this video in week 2. So we're engineering sustainability and in week 2. So under this heading, so this video introduction will be the link here. So all I'm asking you to do this week is to watch this intro and read chapter 1 and the associated reading. So let me just guide you through the way the workbook will work. Click this link, you should be able to get this. This is as a Word document. This is as a Google document, so feel free to create it as a PDF or whatever you want. So the purpose of this book is to produce a guide for you to use for the coursework and potentially for future modules. It's designed at anyone who is working in the built environment. And the main purpose is to make informed decisions, and you'll see as the document goes through, it's making you think about what you should assess, and usually comparisons between option A and option B are going to be clearer to decide on than actually giving a finite answer to this is the carbon footprint of option A. You should be able to say A is better or worse than B. Throughout this module, the main things I'm trying to do is encourage you to be curious. So read things, challenge things, so be critical of data. Don't just believe what you see on the social media. We want you to be very critical of data, and that's very important. So for instance, if you go into the Concrete Society literature or the Steel Society literature, they're unlikely to say that those materials are materials that you shouldn't be using, or say they've got a very, very high carbon footprint. They'll probably use words and statistics that tell you how to reduce the carbon footprint of the material, rather than saying there are options which are substantially different. I also want you to be able to deal with uncertainty. This isn't a subject where you get very defined answers, but that doesn't mean we can't make decisions. As I said before, you can make comparisons with quite a good degree of certainty, even though the figures you're putting in those comparisons could be uncertain. Measuring the difference between options can be very important. So I'm not going to go through the text, but the idea with this document is there's a topic each week. I'm just going to look through this, the big picture now, but you can see just this little contents page giving you a feel for what's happening and why and when it's going to happen. The reading list here is all available online, so you'll see the links put onto the MOL page, and they're all referenced within the documents anyway. There's some kind of bigger ones you could look at, but I'll put those up as well. So the big picture is meant to indicate the problem and the science behind it. And some of these are my opinions. Most of these are things I've read and thought about before. So my provocative statement is, are we now in a situation where civil engineering is doing more harm than good? And I wanted to kind of bring things back to this very basic life needs. So these are Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have a look at that. By all means follow this link. But what I'm trying to say is that these basic needs should be shared equitably across the whole globe. That's what's really important. And then you go further up for things that are becoming more nice to have. So these basic needs, absolutely essential. Psychological needs, very important. And some of these are more desirable. We can't be in a situation where we deny people the basic and psychological needs. So go through this document. What the idea is, I've put a lot of figures in here to make you think about things. So have a look at these, form your own opinions. I'm suggesting that you might get together in tutor groups just on some kind of social chat and discuss what you think about this. We're living well beyond the planned capacity, and we have been doing for a significant amount of time. Something's got to give. By all means challenge these. There's different ways of looking at it. This is one where it's saying at what day in the year would a certain country have used its share, and some of them are incredibly significant, while other ones are almost within their capacity. There's further information to follow there if you would like to. I'm trying to say that climate change is definitely a human interaction, with some graphs with different. Notice things are different timescales, so I always want to be critical of data and look at what's happening. Here are some scenarios that have been produced of where we might be depending on what we do by the end of this century. This is a good source for the actual greenhouse effect itself and understanding climate change. NASA have got some brilliant information. They're doing some kind of long-term survey information, so you can get some good information. This is a document very difficult to read in terms of it's hundreds of pages long, but this is the kind of the gospel, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. This is where all the people get together and decide what is happening and what isn't. So this is the assessment report 5 that was done in 2013. Next one's due in a couple of years, but the leaked drafts tell us where we're going. Some visualizations I think kind of show things are undeniable. As the colour goes from darker to lighter, it's saying that the average world temperature is changing from 1850 to the current date. It's clear visualization for me. Here's some other facts. The 5 coolest and the 5 warmest years are all at extremes of this different date line. It's not just temperature, all climate, environmental things are getting more extreme. So this is an example of wetter periods in Australia, and you'll see that all these are relevant because they start to have knock-on effects. This is from that NASA site again, well worth looking at. This is a link of showing the Australian bushfires and just showing you how small the globe is when it comes to large scale problems. So the fires that are happening at the moment in California will be not just affecting California when you look at this kind of this system. Just some things to make you think. There's more population living inside this circle here than the rest of the whole planet. So that's kind of an area to be very, very careful of. So India, Asia, China, these are the areas where there's going to be some significant issues that we'll discuss about, which may not be the same in the Western world, but it will affect the globe. So population isn't evenly distributed, but neither is the emissions. So this is the richest 10% are giving nearly 50% of the CO2 emissions. So again, there's some significant equity issues, which is why I started off with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are some fundamental things which you can have a think about, and this is if you are spending more money. So this is GDP of a country, sorry, and this is annual energy consumption. There's a clear trend that if you are a more developed location with a higher GDP, the knock-on effect is using more energy, and energy normally then converts into carbon dioxide emissions. That may change or will have to change in time. So again, read these changes. There are 3 big things that are the big factors. Food, again, it doesn't seem a problem in the Western world, but it defines what we do, it defines what's produced. So we're having an effect elsewhere in the globe. Energy, including travel, so have a think about that. And then water for the third one. One of the things we've got to understand is these kind of interdependency diagrams. They're quite complicated, but if we start easily and build up, we'll be able to think about just how interconnected things are. And The point of this is when you're doing some kind of assessment, it's a case of how far does that assessment go. So if you looked at just the water industry or the water supply, it's got significant other effects. So the water cycle, you might look at just one area, the potable water section, but there's the whole life of the water cycle to consider, and then water and industry and everything are interlinked. A little thing that is particularly important for engineers is material selection. Some information about how you might look at that. Looking at a mean, lean, green, and there's the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. So these are kind of mantras you can use to try and minimize what you do, and what you do as green or low carbon as possible. iStruct have now looked at the life cycle beyond the end life of the cycle of the actual project, if you like. So this is very important, and in the past we've just looked at the product and maybe the product and the construction process and maybe the use, but we haven't got in detail to what's going to happen at the end and what's going to happen beyond the end, and this is the kind of thinking we need to introduce. Back to kind of psychology, a little bit of kind of what are we doing and why are we doing it. Capitalism and GDP seem to be a big driver for the world. However, it doesn't seem to be linked to life satisfaction. Back to hierarchy of needs. Once you've got a certain level of income, then increased income doesn't actually make people happier. So maybe we need to think about how we do things. The current economics kind of drive companies in this direction. There's an alternative here, which is something to look about, which is called donut economics. So the link here, this is something I'd like to have a look at, and just spend no more than 15 minutes reading around this subject, unless you find it excessively interesting. So my final thoughts on this chapter are, you might look at all this and think it looks a bit glum, but hopefully one of the reasons why you've come to be engineers is to try and address this issue. Engineers will have and do have the skills to solve many of the problems, but we're currently just valuing money above our carbon footprint. That's my kind of personal opinion, but it's fairly obvious. We make decisions based on pound notes and not on the carbon footprint a lot of the time. The actions we need to take are well understood. It's a behavioural change, and it's a difficult behavioural change. Some people are starting this. Some movements like Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion are starting to take traction. So there's a movement from kind of effectively below. Governments are understanding they need to act, so there's a movement from above. And I think you and your future careers are well positioned to rise to the challenges ahead. So good luck. Read this in detail and have a look at all the links, and then we can discuss or ask questions via the discussion board anytime during the week, and then the chats or the tutorials for things you're not sure about on the Tuesday mornings. Thanks.